I can't even tell you like just how fun it was to write this book. It was legitimately the best month of my life, I think. Things that used to take me 4 months or take me 4 days, 4 hours, everything was just so much faster. It was so fun because I felt like ChatGPT did everything that was annoying. I asked it to make a chart of where NBA players went to college. And it was just instantaneously Michigan State's green, UCLA's yellow, Duke's dark blue, Kentucky's a little bit lighter blue, North Carolina's a little lighter blue than that. That's a big saving of time. They add up to rapid process. So I spent 30 days to write what I think is my proudest book yet.
Seth, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
So for people who don't know, you are an American data scientist, you're an economist, you're an author, you wrote the book Everybody Lies, you also wrote another book called Don't Trust Your Gut, and most recently, you wrote a book called Who Makes the NBA? And you caught my attention because you wrote that book in 30 days. Oh, there it is. You wrote that book in 30 days with ChatGPT, and I was like, oh my God, I need to talk to Seth. So really, really excited to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Dan, I'm a fan. I've listened to some of your podcasts, and I'm the total agreeer with your main point that ChatGPT and AI are just going to transform everything.
Thank you. I love it. So I'm curious to get started. Like you wrote this book in 30 days. Where did the seed for that idea come from? How did you decide to try that?
Well, I just became obsessed with AI, and particularly there's a tool, Code Interpreter. It used to be called Code Interpreter, now it's just called Data Analysis. That does data analysis for you. And I started playing around with it. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. Things that used to take me 4 months or take me 4 days or 4 hours, everything was just so much faster. And so I kind of was like, oh, wow, I could write a book really quickly. And I just thought it'd be fun to have a countdown for myself. I don't think anybody else really necessarily cared about my countdown. But in my head, it was really, a challenge. And so I spent, 30 days. My girlfriend thinks that I have a tendency to exaggerate. So she's like, you need to point out you were doing some research a little bit beforehand, which I say in the book too. So, but it was a shockingly little period of time, in the neighborhood of 30 days of full-time work, I would say, to write what I think is my proudest book yet. Like, I'm so happy with how it turned out. So it was a kind of a wild process, kind of the future of creativity and everything.
I loved it. I thought it was really good. I had not finished the entire thing, but I read a decent chunk of it. And you've got a little bit of a Bill Simmons vibe. It's like sort of Bill Simmons-y because it's like voicey and like a little bloggy and funny, but like more data and like less pop culture type stuff. Is that what you're going for?
Yeah, it was also, I got a message recently from a friend of mine, and he said, Seth, I was blown away by your book, Who Makes the NBA? And he goes, just so you know, I'm not lying. I did not feel that way about your previous 2 books.
That's a good friend.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh, I actually, now I do believe you. So I go, he said, one of the things that blew me away is just so many books, including your previous books, they have so much like fluff, a long story, a build up, big words. And I think, this book, in part because I self-published it, in part because it was a race against time, in part just because that's my theory of book writing. I just kind of limit it to facts, a couple dad jokes, and some graphs. like just really the bare minimum. And I think people actually prefer that. I don't know. The whole book industry seems wrong to me in thinking that people want these long wind up in this story and, descriptions of all the people and, these big words. Kind of just, tell me the point. And I think, this book kind of does that. So that's why my friend was blown away by this one and not my previous 2 books.
That's really interesting. I would sort of love to get into the distinctions in your mind between like the sort of self-publishing industry and the regular book publishing industry and all that kind of stuff. But maybe we can save that for a little later. I want to dive in first. Like, it sounds like one of the main things that you use this book for, use ChatGPT for, is the advanced data analysis, and you said it sort of saved you a lot of time. Is that like, if you had to think about how it's impacted your writing process, maybe for this particular book, is that like the main place that you used it, or were there other places you used it?
That was number one by far. There were some like little ones. There was a point in the book I needed I ranked people on how good they were, basketball players adjusting for their height. And I needed, and I wanted to call the metric something, so I called it Muggsy's after Muggsy Bogues, 5'3", the shortest NBA player in history, who ranks number one on this metric, height adjusted players. So like, that needs to be an acronym, a backronym, but I'm terrible. I wouldn't even know where to begin. How do I call, name Muggsy's as a backronym? So ChatGPT came up with the backronym as metric for understanding game given sporting individuals' effectiveness and size, which is just like unbelievably good, mind-blowingly good in my opinion. Lots of little things having in your back pocket kind of is very useful. You never know where you use it. I don't like the way it writes at this stage. I didn't let it rip on just, write this chapter or something. I let it write my appendix because I didn't really care about the writing the appendix, but the actual writing I did. And then data analysis was just like a lifesaver.
Yeah, that's really cool. It was sort of an eye-opening thing because you have all these charts and graphs about like how for every inch taller you are, your chances of making the NBA doubles. And I'm 6'2", so I have a better chance than a 5'10" guy, but like I was like, okay, I definitely never could have made the NBA. I barely made the JV team in my middle school.
Yeah. No, it is.
Yeah.
It is wild. Just that, like, the doubling relationship is throughout the height distribution. So it's obvious that height helps in playing basketball, but it's this really consistent relationship. I'm not the first one who's found this. Pablo Torre, David Epstein have talked about this, but each inch roughly double the chance to make the NBA. So if you're under 6 feet tall, you have roughly a 1 in 3.8 million chance of making the NBA. And if you're over 7 feet tall, you have roughly 1 in 7 chance of making the NBA, which is just insane. There's no other trait that gives you such a genetically determined trait that gives you like such odds of becoming, a decamillionaire.
That's one of the things that that really stood out to me too. Is like you had another play. I think this is where the Muggsy ranking came in. You had another place in the book where you're sort of talking about how the people who are 7 feet tall, even though you have a 1 in 7 chance of making the NBA just for being 7 feet, like they're actually they're like below average athletes generally. Like if you rank their free throw percentages versus like your average high schooler, like they're not that much better, or maybe they're a little bit worse. That was really surprising.
Yeah, I would say below average, but just average or a little above average. So they're not that special beyond this extraordinary trait they have of being 7 foot tall. Whereas a 6 foot player, they're world-class sprinters. They leap as high as some Olympic high jumpers. They're incredible shooters, on average, just because you're competing. If you're 6 feet tall, you're competing against millions of other men for your spot in the NBA. If you're 7 feet tall, you're competing with dozens of other men for the NBA. So you can you don't have to be that good. And, there are quirks of the game that George Muresan, I think 7'6" man, reached the NBA due entirely to a pituitary gland disorder. He had a pituitary gland disorder that made him enormous. And that was enough, basically by itself, just about to become a competent NBA player for many years. Just height is such an advantage in basketball.
You have to be tall, and you have to come from a country where people play basketball, or where it's one of the things. It's tall or come from a country that plays basketball, not
I see. Because if you're tall enough, it doesn't even really matter in that, like a lot of the literally the greatest NBA players in history didn't start playing basketball till they were 14, 15 years old. And what happens is they're walking down the street and someone says, have you thought of basketball? You are enormous. And then they start playing basketball, Hakeem Olajuwon, Joel Embiid, Tim Duncan, Patrick Ewing, Hall of Famer or future Hall of Fame players. They all started basketball, after the age of 12. And the height was such an advantage combined with, reasonably good athleticism that it was enough to carry them to the NBA. And they didn't need to live in a basketball powerhouse. But if you're 6 foot tall, 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", you have to grow up in one of the few regions of the world that really love basketball. Otherwise, you just play soccer or something else.
That's interesting. I know you said this is sort of rare, but is there anything off the top of your head where you can another area in the professional world or elsewhere in the world where like having one trait that is like so off the charts, like kind of catapults you to the top automatically, or is it usually just like a more complicated mix of factors that are harder to pin down?
Yeah, I think it's usually a more complicated mix of factors. Maybe, mathematical ability for being a mathematician, maybe super genetic. And, many of them, their fathers were also great mathematicians. And I don't know. I'd have to think, a lot of the other pursuits, there are so many things that come into play. So being a president, you need the appearance, you need the intelligence, you need the social skills, you need the height, you need kind of a lot of different things. Some of them that are genetic, some of them can be trained. You need connections. There are all kinds of things that come into play. Yeah, it's interesting. I haven't really thought of any. I don't know that there's anything else that gives you a 1 in 7 chance of that level of success. Jockey being really short is very valuable, but I think there are a lot more short men. You kind of want to be 5'3", 5'2", but particularly when you consider worldwide, there are a lot more 5'2" and 5'3" men than there are 7 feet men because, some of I even talk about in the book, some countries in Asia, the average height is 5'4", 5'5". So there are plenty of men that short.
That makes sense. So I want to get back to some ChatGPT stuff. So you said when it first came out and you're using Code Interpreter, which is now called Advanced Data Analysis. Like, what was the thing that like got you were like, holy shit, I can't believe that this is now possible and this is going to save me so much time?
Everyone's looking for like the one thing that blew you away, and it's usually not that. It's just thousands of little things that add up to tremendous time saving. So just the fact that, you could just tell it, download this data set, run this regression, make a chart of that. And it does that, right away was so wild because, I'm not the world's greatest coder. Sometimes I work with, people to help me, but that's kind of a time consuming process, a lot of back and forth and, frustration. So right away, just the fact that, you can talk to Code Interpreter and now Advanced Data Analysis and get Python code back and then results back and charts back and new data sets, merge data sets back. It was pretty clear to me pretty early on that this was revolutionary.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. So for people who are listening who haven't used it before, what Advanced Data Analysis does is you can say, hey, like here's a data set. And then please run a regression, and it will go and write the code to run the regression. It will run the code, and then it will return the answer back to you. And normally, that's something that all those steps you'd have to sort of like do manually. And in this case, you can talk to it and say, no, you didn't do it right, or hey, do it this way, or draw the graph in this way, and it will modify the code, so you don't have to do it directly. Which it sounds like you love. I've loved it. It's been truly incredible, and I think ChatGPT is the only mainstream model that has that so far. They'll all write code, but none of them run it for you, and so it's a big differentiator.
One of the things it did is I asked it to make a chart of where NBA players went to college, and I asked it to make each college the color of that college. And it was just instantaneously Michigan State's green, UCLA's yellow, Duke's dark blue, Kentucky's a little bit lighter blue, perfect. North Carolina's a little lighter blue than that. And like that's not a wild, oh my God, that changes everything. I would have never been able to do this on my own. But that's a big saving of time. And when you add a whole bunch of those savings, they add up to just a rapid process. I think the other thing about the process too that I noticed is it was so fun because I felt like ChatGPT did everything that was annoying. I don't know if that's something you can relate to, but it feels like, what I like to do, my dream day, my perfect day is give me a data set and let me just think of some questions to ask it and, like rapidly. And kind of in this book, that's what it was. Whereas my usual day of data analysis is merge a data set, clean a data set, look up code on how to make the chart. Oh, the chart's not really working, which is not fun for me.
I feel the same way. I think what ChatGPT reveals to me is that there is a lot of drudgery in creative work that we don't really talk about. And it doesn't matter what kind of creative work you're doing. If you're a data scientist, if you're a programmer, or if you're a writer, like writers, for example, we spend a lot of time summarizing other people's ideas. So like, I'll read if I want to write about utilitarianism, I'll like read a bunch of Wikipedia pages about utilitarianism, even though I know what it is, just to refresh myself. And then I'll try to like summarize what I've read into a couple sentences so that I can like write the article that I want to write. And ChatGPT just sort of does that for you in the perfect way. So you don't have to summarize it anymore. And you can just like, be engaged in other parts of the process that are actually more interesting for you. And I think your point about your perfect day and being able to ask questions, I think is like exactly where things are going. Is as things progress, I feel like we are more and more living in a world where any question that humans know the answer to is answerable pretty quickly. And so the real skill, or the really interesting thing, is knowing which questions to ask. And I think that is still like left to us, and that's like really fun and exciting for me.
Totally agree. And that is actually something I asked ChatGPT to do. Could you help me ask questions? And it wasn't that good at it. So that was kind of cool. That kind of felt like, oh, maybe I still have some use on this planet. And that is exactly what I like doing. And I don't know. It was wildly fun. I mean, the other thing we can get into is the art in the book, which maybe doesn't stand out because lots of people are using, Midjourney and DALL-E to create art, but that kind of fits into the fun of the process, and also giving you skills that, allowing you to express creativity that you would otherwise be unable to express. So, I've always thought that inside me is a Vincent van Gogh. Somewhere inside me is a Van Gogh, and that, I consider myself a creative person. Like, I have a million ideas a minute about, all how things should be, but I have zero artistic talent. You ask me to draw a horse, I can't draw anything that's in the universe of a horse. Now with, chat with Midjourney and DALL-E, I say, first chapter on genetics, have a piece of DNA dribbling a basketball between its legs, and DALL-E draws that, and that's fun because that's kind of a creative idea for the, what the art should be, but it's executed by DALL-E, so I'm actually able to express this creativity that otherwise would be dormant.
Totally. No, I definitely have noticed that too. Like when I break down what this stuff is useful for, it's like there's three things to me. It's like, one, it makes you faster, maybe like 30% faster at what you already are doing. Two, it gives you skills that you don't have, so you can do work that you couldn't have done previously. Like with DALL-E, like you might have ideas for images, but you can't make them. Now you can. And then three is it sort of lowers the bar for what kinds of projects you can start, because it's much faster to get started on something new. And so you can do net new work and try net new experiments that you like never would have done before, because it would have, all of the work is doable for you, but it would have taken you 15 hours to like get set up. And now it just takes like 2 seconds and you just write one prompt. And I think all of those categories are exciting.
Yeah, I totally agree. What are examples of the third category? Because I haven't thought as much about that one.
Yeah, like for me, it's like I often will have like little ideas for like software products that I want to make. So that's a thing where it would have ordinarily, like all the programming for that is known. It's not like super advanced. It's just like pretty. It's pretty. It would just be rote, and I'd have to like go think about a lot of things and look up APIs and all that kind of stuff. And ChatGPT, you can just kind of like write a couple commands and get like a very basic app working, and then modify it from there. And it, takes 30 minutes instead of 4 days to like get started.
Yeah, it's wild. I love this podcast you're doing, just because I mean, it's right up my alley, but I so agree with you that people just aren't changing their lives enough based on this. It does feel like, all the rules are, overnight kind of transformed of, how long a project should take. And what does that mean? I think so much about the book publishing industry because I've written books, and Dan and I are actually featured at a future AI and book publishing event in a couple of weeks. We're going to talk about this. I'm so looking forward to it because I just think this industry's it's just like, what does it mean when you can write, I think, a good book in 30 days? And like, how does that change the public? That seems to just like totally change all the rules of how publishing works, should work. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's a whole new world. I think it's super exciting. I'm really glad you love the podcast. I'd love to just dive into some chats. Like, do you have some use cases of ChatGPT that you can walk us through for, the way you use it to write this book?
Yeah, some of the art gets a little bit messed up. One of the things that's interesting is, all right.
Before we get started, so before you dive in, like just give us a little bit of background. Like, tell us what this chat is. Tell us how you started to like get into it. Why you started this chat.
Yeah, so this was, I discussed earlier that I felt I needed a backronym for Mugsies, my metric for ranking NBA players on a height adjusted basis. And I had no idea even where to begin. So I literally, I don't think if you gave me, this is similar to art. I think if you gave me unlimited time, I'm not sure I could come up with a good a backronym for Mugsies. It's not really in my skill set. I mean, maybe I could in the same way that monkeys could type Shakespeare eventually, but it would take me, a long time. So I asked I said, ChatGPT, could you think of an acronym for that? And one of the things I like about this chat is I think people sometimes think that ChatGPT gives you the right answer on the first approach, on the first ask, that you just sit back and then if it doesn't, they kind of give up. And what you actually see is the first answer by ChatGPT was kind of not that great. Mastery, unique, growth, game changer, size adjusted, influence, efficiency scoring, and then it just starts impact goes kind of crazy. And I said, I explained more clearly what I'm doing. I also noticed that sometimes I'm very rude to ChatGPT. I'm not sure how to feel about this. I don't believe it has consciousness. If it had consciousness, I'd feel really bad because I'm kind of asshole to it. I'm just like, do this, do that, kind of treat it like a slave. And then it gives me one. So I asked it again. Give me something to describe the stats, which is 8 words, and the first letter of first word is M, second word is U, etc. It gets a little better. Measures unparalleled growth, signifying individual efficiency in scoring. Not really that good for Mugsy's metric. I also say that that should have 2 G's. It only has 1, and it's not just about scoring. You see, it tries again. Mastery utilized for gauging games. I get a complaint that doesn't explain the stat at all. Now it's getting measure of utilized game performing, gauging size, impact, effectiveness, and skill. I said that's close, but please try again. No, I didn't say please. I should have said please. And then I said metric for understanding a player's game given individual efficiency and size. And now we're getting really close. But I say efficiency is the wrong word. Can you give me a different E word that captures overall performance? And then it comes effectiveness. And then I just noticed that it's actually missing an S. So it's still not perfect. It's metric for understanding game given an individual's effectiveness and size, but I need an S word. And then it puts the S word in the wrong place. I explain that I explain again that it put in the wrong place. And then I say, try again, offer me 10 possibilities. And then I didn't like any of the 10, so I said, give me 20 possibilities. And then does it get it? Oh, and then eventually we land on, or I kind of landed more on sporting individuals' effectiveness and size. So I think, there's a lot to take from that conversation. But the main thing is that, ChatGPT really is a tool, and you can't really expect it to nail it on the first attempt. It's a process, and there's a lot of error. There's a lot of back and forth. And you kind of got to guide it. You did that wrong. Give me 20 possibilities. Give me 10 possibilities. And keep on working until you eventually get there. So it's not that, from my experience of ChatGPT, I wonder if this is similar to yours. It's not that you just, tell it one shot and it's perfect. You got to really, start the conversation and build to the right answer.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right. I think that's exactly where most people get tripped up is they're like, they give it a huge task to do all in one shot, and then it doesn't work, and they're like, well, this isn't good.
Yeah, and then they mock it. They like laugh at it. It's so bad it didn't even get the letters right. Look how bad ChatGPT is. Well, no, you got to start. That's just the start of the conversation.
Totally. No, I think this is a really good like example of how to best use it, which is like give it a task, really simple prompt to start, and then just keep going back and forth with it. You're offering your own thoughts, like you offer sporting because you like thought about it yourself, and like that helps it. So I think it's really good. I do have to point out, I'm professionally obligated to point out, you're using ChatGPT 3.5 for this.
Oh, usually I use 4.0. I think I must have been time limit. I must have been on my limit. What I call timeout. Okay. Yeah.
Good. I'm glad because I would have been pretty disappointed otherwise.
No, definitely the book, or maybe it's not. Maybe I just have ChatGPT in the. It might just also be I have ChatGPT I had ChatGPT 3.5 on my home screen or whatever. So I don't know if it was using. I don't think it was using 4.0. I used 4.0 for almost the whole book. So
okay, cool.
If it wasn't, it was only because I was on timeout. So yeah, then it would be even more. It would have been better probably and quicker. Maybe it wouldn't have made mess ups if it was GPT 4.0.
I do think it would have probably been a little bit better at making sure that it got the acronyms actually right instead of like forgetting what it actually was. And yeah, to your point about being polite, I'm always very polite, but I don't know if that's the right move either. The politeness is sort of like a Pascal's wager for like if AGI comes and it's like threatening, you know. But I think it's also possible that being not polite, it might get you better results because it's afraid of you. I don't know. I
just remember I follow Ethan Mollick, and
yeah,
he just showed these examples where he was super impolite to ChatGPT, and I'm like, oh, I guess that's how you do it. I think I watched that right before I was talking to ChatGPT for this Muggsy thing. I'm not always so aggressive, but sometimes I am. I'm just like, I don't know. Yeah, maybe I'll follow your advice, Pascal's wager.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, if they're conscious, it's like their experience is negative infinity versus like, it's probably like negative infinity and negative infinity minus plus one or something if you're nice to them, right? They're working all the time as human being slaves. So maybe Pascal's wagers would just suggest don't use ChatGPT or don't create ChatGPT rather than be nice to ChatGPT.
It's totally possible. I think that's an interesting philosophical question. My sense is like if they are conscious, the consciousness is so different from ours that like they may actually enjoy doing these kinds of completions in a way that we probably wouldn't, because it's like literally what they've been trained on. It's how their like consciousness manifests is completing sentences. So, but you never know.
But they would also enjoy being treated politely. I don't know.
Yeah, you're
it's like
right.
a thin line of like.
It sort of breaks down at that point. You're right. Cool. This is great. I'd love to move on. What else do you want to go through with me?
Let's see. So this is height of NBA players, and one of the things, and this kind of just shows the basics of advanced data analysis for people that don't know. So you ask it, you upload the file, and then it'll tell you some basics about the file. And then you just talk to it. Can you give me a histogram of height inches? And here's a beautiful histogram of height inches, right? Number of players, how many players at every height, does it really well. I noticed.
Let me stop you there real quick. So how long would that normally take you? Like going from data set to histogram?
That's not that long. That's pretty quick. But I think the whole process, if you don't like coding as I don't like, it's not just that it's not quick. It's not that how long it takes. It's just labor intensive. It's just a pain. I can't code for 5 hours a day even, but I can talk to ChatGPT for 5 hours a day, for like 10 hours a day. So it's just kind of annoying for me to do this thing. So this isn't, I would say, the most labor intensive. But, then I just noticed, it didn't have, if you look at the actual histogram, it doesn't have individual inches. You see it has groups of inches. And that kind of bothered me. So I wanted to have every inch. So I asked it to do that. Can you have every inch of height included? And it does that very nicely. And now can you only include American-born NBA players? Now it's just histogram of American-born NBA players. Again, just really nice to just constantly just be asking these questions and having the chart come back, pretty much instantaneously. What's the most common height, and say what it is in feet? The most common height is 81 inches. Let's see. Oh, I asked it to give a label of the most common height inside the bar for 6'9", and it puts it puts the label. This is another thing that's important for ChatGPT is initially you see where the label is. It's not really where I want that label to be. I want it vertically. And ChatGPT doesn't understand that, but I ask it to switch. It's in vertical, and now it's vertical, if you can see right here. Most common height, 6'9". So there's a lot of back and forth, and this is getting to the point of things that would take a lot of time. Figuring out how to label it, switch vertical, get it exactly in the right spot are very time-consuming projects, and this is done almost instantaneously. Change it to red, and now it's in red. Get rid of horizontal and vertical lines. It's just all kinds of things that, just very, very quick to change the chart to get to the chart that you want. Again, just very, very, very fun stuff to kind of have these things. I think eventually my next chart, which I'll go through a little quickly, is a normal distribution of height of American men versus NBA players. And you see it puts those on the same chart together very, very quickly. Just really, and I didn't even use these in my book, but you're just playing around with it, over, the colors overlap here. Make it so they're purple when they overlap. It does that. Most common height. It's just really fun to make these charts. You see, it's not just, I think what I want people to take from this is kind of similar to the Mugsy's thing, that it's not just you tell, this is how this chart, probably one of the better versions of this chart of the normal distribution of men, the height distribution of men, the height distribution of NBA players. And what you see is there's a long back and forth. It's not that you just, and part of the back and forth is you're trying to figure out in your head what you want, right? So you're trying to figure out how you want this chart to look. Do individual inches matter? Should the bars be vertical? Should there be horizontal bars behind it? What should the colors be? Should the colors, when they overlap, be blue or purple or red? All these things are, decisions that you have to make in your head that you can't tell ChatGPT right away. But the great thing about ChatGPT and advanced data analysis is it just comes back very quickly with those changes. And, it's a conversation. For me, it's a fun conversation. It's not a laborious, coding's a laborious, unfun conversation because half the time, you forget the coding. How do I code to make just the part shaded under the region purple? Or, how do I determine the spot to put the most common height? How do I change the font for that? How do I do all these things? And, it's always looking it up. It's just a pain in the ass that makes the whole process. You're kind of going to the refrigerator a lot, procrastinating if you're me doing that. And for me, there's no going to the refrigerator and procrastinating. The only times I stop working is when ChatGPT gives me a timeout and says I have to stop working. And I get disappointed because I want to continue working. So I think what I want people to take from these examples is it's not instantaneous and you can't get frustrated. Sometimes the chart gives you truly crazy things. It's really a long back and forth, but it is a fun back and forth. And, if you know how to work with ChatGPT, it really is a lifesaver in time and doing things. I think that's like kind of the main point that I want from people to take from my use that I took from using ChatGPT to write this NBA book.
That makes a lot of sense. There's so much in here that I feel and that I agree with. Like, I see you playing here in this really interesting way, and I think your point about programming is really interesting. Like, I do feel like what ChatGPT has shown us is how much of programming is like looking up answers on Stack Overflow usually, or Googling around for them basically. And what ChatGPT does is it sort of gets rid of the need to do that. And I think what you're saying is what that does for you is it takes this process that you would have a question, and having a question is very energizing, it seems like to you. But the process of getting the answer used to be sort of like energy sucking for you because you don't really want to be Googling around or like typing in code or whatever. And the same exact process is now giving you energy because you just like having a conversation. And I think that's really cool. It turned the act of getting answers into something that you actually enjoy instead of something that you have to like get through in order to like get the result you wanted.
That's exactly right. So how do you write a book in 30 days? Well, one of the ways to write a book in 30 days is to work 13 or 14 hours every day. And again, I could not work 13 or 14 hours if I had on a normal coding project, because it's just too much of a pain in the ass and too annoying and too frustrating. And this was just a joy to me. The whole thing, I don't know. I can't even tell you just how fun it was to write this book. It was legitimately the best month of my life, I think. And I mean, partly because it's about basketball and obsessed with basketball, but I don't know. Maybe I'm unique. Whatever those chats are, those were just super fun to me. Like even just adjusting the chart in that way, but without the coding part. Like I am a perfectionist and I like going things over and over again. But the coding part is just so not fun that process is not fun. And the process with ChatGPT is fun for me. So kind of how do you communicate the information in a way that would be most compelling to other people?
Yeah. That's the thing that I think is also interesting about it that you mentioned is like having the conversation and having it do something. When it does something for the first time, you sort of notice all of these constraints or all these things you want to change that you wouldn't have been able to specify before you started. And so it's sort of helping you understand what you want as the conversation goes along, instead of having to like specify all those things like up front. And I think that process is super exciting because you're like unraveling what it is that you want or what you care about as you're having the conversation with it.
Yeah, and in some ways, normal coding is the same way, but just the difference for me in this process in normal coding is night and day in how much more joyful and free and fun it is to use ChatGPT versus editing and adjusting your code. Half the time you adjust your code, you still make a mistake. Where's the bug in the code? It's just, and going from, looking up the code, writing the code, looking for your bug in the code, adjusting the code, to ChatGPT doing it instantaneously, even if that's just 20 minutes to 1 minute, it is changing something that's 20 minutes, then a 40-minute break where I need to recharge myself, to 1 minute and then another 1 minute, and then another 1 minute, then another 1 minute, then another 1 minute of a new chart. And that is like night and day in the research process, right?
Totally. So curious, like, do you have other chats that you want to show us?
Those are the two I wanted to show that made the biggest impression. I think a lot of them are, let me see.
And you don't have to if you don't have anything.
Yeah, let me see if they're. Yeah, I'll show you one more. This one actually is an example of it working very much simpler, which sometimes happens too. I have a whole section of my book on the names of NBA players. It's actually, basketball fans will find this, I hope, interesting, is that I call the chapter, why is Chris the most popular name among Black NBA players? And the reason for that is it's a sign of the demographics of NBA players. So African Americans from richer demographics, upper middle class demographics, are much more likely to be given common names: Chris, Marcus, James, Mike. African Americans from poorer demographics are much more likely to be given unique names. LeBron, when he was given that name, DeBrickashaw, names like that. And if you look at NBA players, they're disproportionately common names, not unique names. So I thought a fun way to show that is just to make a word cloud. Again, I could look up how to make a word cloud. It's not that hard, but it's a little bit annoying because to make a word cloud of first names, my data set doesn't have, doesn't have first name, last name. It has just name of NBA players. And, so you have to first, separate them then you have to, look up how to make a word cloud. It's not a big deal at all, but it's just that ugh factor that leads me to procrastinate and check what's on the New York Times, because I'm just like, I don't really feel like doing that right now. And now instead, this is very fun. So limit it to years between 1970 and 1998. A word cloud of first names of Black players. Don't include anyone with initials, because a lot of players have initials, and you have this very nice word cloud. But there are a couple of things I want to change. Only include those born in America. Again, really, really simple. It doesn't matter if the data set is labeled United States or USA or anything like that. ChatGPT will instantaneously figure out, what's the label of America. So right now we get rid of all the foreign-born players. If you notice this version of the chart, I want a title. Okay, it makes the title. You notice this version of the chart, Chris is the main player. The most common name is vertical. And I just thought actually it'd be nice to have that horizontal, because the chapter's about why are so many NBA players Chris. This is another thing that I would never think of, discussing first. But if it's all about Chris, I should have Chris, more prominently, easier to follow display. So that's another one. It's just, I hope coders understand, just like all these little things. Okay, let me look how to make sure Chris is horizontal. That's another little time on Stack Overflow, or a little time here, and a little annoying, and a little me walking to the fridge to, or walking to pour another cup of coffee because it's annoying. Instead, ChatGPT, make Chris horizontal, and now it comes back, Chris is horizontal in the new version of it. So again, I think what I want people to take away from all these examples is it's just the little things. It's the difference between these instantaneous, don't look up code, boom, 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 is such a big difference for a data scientist. It changes the whole process, in my opinion. So, I think a lot of people are looking to be blown away more. You use ChatGPT to write a book in 30 days. I think they just assume, maybe, did you just say, hey, give me 10 insights on the NBA from this data set? And that I wasn't able to use ChatGPT to do. Maybe one day you will be able to do it. But what you are able to do is just take these laborious, boring, annoying processes and make them instantaneously and make them nearly instantaneous, so that you just can keep firing away and hammering away at these fun questions.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to the extent that you have interesting questions to ask it, basically. But if you just ask it for 10 insights, it's going to be sort of bland. I'm really curious, like, when you're doing this, how are you? Because I've had this experience with Code Interpreter or Advanced Data Analysis, where I'll ask it a question, it'll give me an answer, and then it's sort of wrong. But how do you tell when you need to like go into the data set and like check whether the size of Marcus is like really right for the number of Marcuses in the data set?
Yeah, you definitely learn over time when you need to check and when you don't need to check. So merges, for example, can be a nightmare with ChatGPT, in that merges are a nightmare with human beings too. Merging a data set, it's so often, that things get messed up. In the NBA data set, some data sets, Hall of Fame players have an asterisk next to their name. And some data sets, those players don't have an asterisk. Some data sets label junior differently. There are all these, differences, and the merge can be really problematic. So I didn't do any merge without carefully going over let me see a sample of players. Let me see a sample of the Hall of Fame players. Let me see a sample of the junior players. Let me download the data set. How many observations does it have? All these checks, like a merge, you have to double and triple check. The other thing is I do know Python coding. I'm not an expert at Python, but I know enough that I always read the code that it comes out of it. So you can pretty much, you can have a pretty good idea if it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, in checking the first names. For this one, I probably did a couple more checks of, list the players with the name Chris, making sure that they all check out. along with going over the code. So you definitely do some checks on just about everything, but a lot of it is just intuition over time. Regressions, for example, ChatGPT tends to perform beautifully with no problems. So I'm pretty comfortable just letting it ride, letting it go on the regressions. I mean, I definitely double check the code, but I'm not getting too much in the weeds because it definitely does what it's supposed to be doing. But merges, you need to do a little bit more. You kind of get an intuition over time of how likely ChatGPT is to mess something up. The other good thing is ChatGPT's mistakes, maybe differently than human mistakes. This may be different than human mistakes, tend to be really glaring and obvious. So like the mistake won't be it has too many Marcuses. It'll be like everybody is named Anthony, and it just shows Anthony. I think whereas a human wouldn't make that mistake, or if they did make that mistake, they wouldn't show it to you. So usually when you get a chart back from an RA, it's plausible and it's a little more, but it might be plausibly wrong. I think ChatGPT's mistakes tend to be very implausible from what I've known. It's very rare that it comes back with a chart that's almost right. It's kind of either nails it or really messes things up. So that's helpful in going over things.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I do think that people tend to, and I've noticed this myself too, just like managers get a sense for like when they need to like check into the details of something that a direct report is doing or maybe a research assistant is doing. I think model managers, people who are using ChatGPT and other models, like get that same sense of like, this is an area where it like might mess up and I should probably check into the details versus like, no, this is generally right. And it's probably going to be good at this. And I can just like keep going. Which I think it's a really interesting skill to have to develop. And it's something that I think people look at, again, sort of like it didn't give me the right answer on the first try. They look at it as sort of one of those reasons why, they shouldn't use it. But once you develop the sense for it, it doesn't actually become a blocker. It's just another thing. It's just another aspect of using the tool that you start to get used to.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, 100%. That was definitely my experience. It was, everything pretty much is doable, and doable in a way that's not painstaking and boring. Pretty much every time it's doable in a way that, as I said, is fun. And for me, for whatever, I enjoy kind of going, I don't mind going over a graph a few times or, going through some errors. It's usually doable and it's usually fun. And you do have to be a little more patient than some people realize in working with ChatGPT for data analysis.
I really wonder what it is about your personality, and I think mine too, like where we would rather do it this way. We would rather have the conversation and be talking than coding. Because like I think there are other people that feel the opposite, but I wonder like what that little thing is that like makes it fun for us and less expensive for us. And sort of like allows us to be so excited about this, where I think other people might be like, I'd rather just like look it up on Stack Overflow or type it out myself.
Yeah, that's a good question. I have no idea. I'm so far from that I can't even imagine the mindset of someone who would feel that way. Just because that is my nightmare of, and this is so nice for me. And
I love it. Okay, cool. So now we're sort of starting to get into the part of the show where we do some exploration, and we are going to do a live exploration of a data set with you. So tell us what the data set is.
Yes, this is a data set of Olympic athletes, basically throughout history. Every athlete, their height, their weight, and their whether they won a medal or not, the sport they participated in, the country they're from. So I just thought maybe it'd be fun to play around with this data set, see if we find anything interesting or fun in the data set.
I have a question that I'd like to ask it, if you think this is a good question. I want to know, given my height, weight, and country, which sport I would be most likely to medal in.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I don't know if we can do that. That's a good question. It's still uploading it. Yeah. Let's see. Maybe I suspect that we might have to do that in stages. First, build the model of country, and like for each sport, maybe come up with a height, weight, country model.
Okay.
And then, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Is it too complicated? If it's too complicated, we don't have to.
We can try it. If it fails, is it a big deal? I don't know. Or
No, it's not a big deal at all. If it fails,
okay.
like we'll learn something anyway. We'll discover something interesting. So explain that to us. Explain how you'd want to attack this.
Yeah. So, well, actually, let's just see first if we can do just your question. So you said you're 6'2", Dan?
I'm 6'2". I'm about 160 pounds.
160 pounds. And I'm using ChatGPT 4. Can you? I'm
from the U.S.
I'm from the United States. Well, we leave out the country. I think that's
okay.
We can add that later. What sport would give me the best chance of success? I don't know. My guess is it's not going to tell you a lot here.
So a couple things I'm noticing is like you didn't tell it necessarily that that the data set that you uploaded.
And you already noticed something that I should have done because it's not doing it. Oh no, yeah. Okay, so now it's uploading the athlete data.
Okay, got it. So basically you didn't have to even give it that, which is kind of interesting. I'm curious how well it does.
Yeah.
But
usually when you upload it, that's enough. It knows it's supposed to look at that.
Right. So it's giving like a general answer at first, which is like basketball, which we already know. I would be pretty short for an NBA player. Volleyball, track and field.
Yeah, the answers aren't that good because your height is actually not an significant advantage in the NBA. That 6'2", is not the best sport.
Not gonna help me too much. I'm really curious what kind of analysis it's doing. So I can see basically first what it did is it just looked through the data set.
Yeah, so it's trying to understand the data set and it sees what it shows. So that it's learning what the height and the weight categories are. Yeah, and now it's doing analysis. Let's see.
And while it's analyzing, I have a very important question: is it data or data?
Oh, I don't know. I think you could say either way. Okay. So it gave an interesting approach, which is not a good one, but it's interesting how it did it wrong. It actually did something that I wouldn't have thought to do. Mm-hmm. So if you look closely, what it did is first it converted yours to centimeters and kilograms, because that's what the data set is. Another one of those things that's just really nice that it just does that, and you don't have to think about it. And, again, it wouldn't take very long, but it's just nice it did it. Now what it's going to try to do is it's going to find the players. It gives a tolerance range. So it chose 5 centimeters and 5 kilograms. And it's going to find the number of people within that tolerance range in that sport. And right away, you can think what's wrong with this is it's going to be way overweighted to people who have more sports, right? Who just have more athletes.
Sports that have more athletes.
Yeah. So you see number one is athletics. Well, track and field has the most athletes: swimming, cycling, rowing, fencing. So I think that's not what we actually wanted, right? This is not telling you.
We could get there by just dividing out.
Yeah. So now we can say this actually was an interesting approach, and I'm not sure it's necessarily wrong. And I wouldn't have actually thought of that. I would have thought to do a model. So I think actually ChatGPT, this is an example of it doing something that's maybe a little more sensible than how I would have thought to do it.
It's simpler.
Yeah, it's simpler. Can you divide by total athletes in that sport? So what fraction are in that range? And show me the top 10. One thing we might have to do, just using ChatGPT a lot, is we may have to do a minimum number of athletes, because it may come back with something that has only a few athletes and all of them are in it. So that's something that you have to think about. But
I'm also sort of wondering, like, age. Like, I'm 32, so I wonder if my Olympic dreams are already over. If if we have the age of these athletes too.
Yeah, that's.
We could add that later.
Okay, so this is interesting. Actually, I wouldn't have guessed some of these. Triathlon, volleyball, and beach volleyball. I wouldn't have thought.
Interesting.
That it may have 5 centimeters, maybe a little too big.
Big tolerance range, yeah.
Yeah. could you do 2 centimeters on the tolerance range?
So help me interpret these results though. So basically like triathlon, it's giving 0.12, volleyball, it's giving 0.11. What is the 0.11 or 0.12?
So 12% of triathlon athletes in the Olympics who have participated in the Olympics have been within 5 centimeters and 5 kilograms of your height and weight.
Got it. And what about, we also want it to be medalers. So maybe we want to filter.
I don't know that we want medalers because I think we're going to lose so much in the statistical power.
I see.
I think you're going to throw out so much information.
Okay.
Relative to total athletes. We can try it. But
that's totally fine.
Do 2 centimeters on the tolerance range. Cause I think, one of the things that volleyball players may come up high because the high end of that 5 centimeter tolerance range is going to be a little bit higher. So let's try to now we're really talking about people that are really about 6'2".
And I think it was 5 kilograms, right?
I think that's okay though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, so now it's a little different. Triathlon, volleyball, modern pentathlon, Nordic. It's interesting. I wouldn't necessarily guess some of these. So I think
I wouldn't have guessed. Yeah. Triathlon.
So one of the things I'm guessing from this, and this will maybe flatter your ego. One of the things I'm taking from this is 6'2" is still very, very tall. So this is clearly pushed in the direction of the sports where height is a big advantage. So basketball and volleyball. So I would have thought that your height would not be advantageous in basketball because you're so far from the 6'7", 6'8" point. But even among basketball players, there are more athletes. A higher percent of athletes are 6'2" than among sports where height is not such an advantage. You're still kind of in the.
I would guess that's because it's international, right? Like India may have fewer, really, really tall people, but they still have to field a team, right?
We could try and limit the United States, but it might get dated.
That might be too small, right?
We could see. I could also say one of the things I might say afterwards is also tell me the total number of athletes. Actually, I'll stop and start again. Could you limit to USA athletes? Also, for each sport, tell me percent and total count of athletes in that category.
That's cool.
Because now I'll know if we're getting.
How would you know if a number is like enough for it to be like a good statistical test?
There are more fancy ways to put this, to do this. I think, when you're getting 2% of athletes or something, what I really say I should have said the total count of athletes in your range. You definitely need, 5 to at least 5, probably more athletes in your range to make this worthwhile.
Yeah.
12 athletes in range. That's pretty good. Yeah. So I guess this still is.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Table tennis.
Basketball. Is basketball a little lower than it was? Not that much, actually. No, it's still, it's similar basketball United States athletes. And
it's interesting because there's so many more of those athletes. Like, there's 44 in swimming, but it seems like 41 in swimming, but it seems like there's just more swimming overall. So that's why it's not the top.
This is one where I'd probably double check that it did do it right. So can you list all the luge athletes, their country, and their height and weight? All the canoeing.
See, this is an interesting thing. Yeah, because you're not worried that it's going to list all of the luge athletes in the original data set. You think it's...
No, I should potentially be worried. That I may have just messed this up.
Okay.
I probably should have done that. You're probably right. Yeah, I think it's messing up. You're right. That's just, you make mistakes, and if I saw it, I would have. Canoeing athletes, all of the 7. I probably could just say the 7. Let's see if I just saying 7 canoeing athletes.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Let's see. Yeah. Now it knows. It's using the filtered data USA.
Okay.
Let's see if the canoeing athletes are within the range and from the USA. I'm not 100% sure it's going to be. Like if I was doing this, I would have done more checks along the way if I were probably. It looks. Oh, you see, this is something. These are the types of things you don't realize until you do it. It has the data set has multiple observations if they were in more than one Olympic.
Ooh.
So, again, not a mistake on ChatGPT necessarily part, but that's like, you always got to be checking for these little things.
Right. So what do you do now? Like, let's say we want to, okay.
But only include each athlete once, even if they were in multiple Olympics.
I'm super curious if it does this well, because it's like, sometimes it's not good at like backing up and like redoing things, it gets confused about which step to redo it on.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, I agree with that. Well, canoeing's down to 5, which I think is what it should be.
Interesting.
So
I guess, and pentathlon I think it got moved up, because I used to be, the top one was triathlon.
Oh, is that right? Yes, maybe there's one that makes sense. Maybe the triathlon.
What are the sports in the modern pentathlon?
And we can ask ChatGPT, right?
Let's ask. I want to know.
Fencing, freestyle
swimming, equestrian show jumping, pistol shooting, and cross country running. Shouldn't there be 5? That's fascinating. Okay, we're missing one.
Oh, it just divides pistol shooting and.
Oh. Okay.
I'm going to see if it's right. Sports, modern pentathlon.
This is interesting. Wow. Okay, so.
Fencing, freestyle swimming, equestrian show jumping, pistol shooting, and cross country running.
I got it. Yeah.
That's good, right? Yeah.
So this is my sport. Apparently, I should be learning fencing and pistol shooting and equestrian show jumping. I don't think ChatGPT realizes that I'm Jewish and that like we don't really do the like pistol shooting thing.
You know what's actually a sport that's great for Jews is swimming. A huge percent of the American swimmers are Jews. Yeah, that too, probably.
When I got bar mitzvahed, my one of the people who went to my bar mitzvah like gave me this book called like Great Jews in Sports, and I always used to joke that it was like 3 pages long. It was like Sandy Koufax was like had like 15 pages.
Yeah. No, a lot of the swimmers, like the guy Spitz, who won all those Olympic medals, was Jewish. A bunch of the swimmers.
Interesting. Well, that's on my list too, right?
Was on the list.
I think swimming was on the list too.
It might have been one of them. I don't know if it was. Oh yeah. You're right.
But maybe not the. I don't know if it counted in the redone one.
Yeah,
that's fascinating. I love this. I love that. I think it's such a good encapsulation of what you were saying earlier, that any question you have, you can just sort of answer super quickly. And I don't know how long this analysis would have taken, but like it's enough. It's probably enough that in another setting, if I had asked that question, it wouldn't have been worth it to you without this to like go through the process of answering the question. But with ChatGPT, it's like we can actually just answer that question. It doesn't take that much time, and I just love that. It's such an empowering feeling.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. And this one, it actually gave, I think, a more sensible way to look at a first pass of the problem than I had thought of. I was going to run a whole regression model, and that was kind of, I think ChatGPT's approach was much more sensible, especially for, again, just eyeballing it initially.
Totally. Totally.
Yeah.
Well, I guess like sort of just, I don't know, wrapping up, like what are you, where are you going with this? Like, what's your next step? You've obviously written that book in 30 days. Like, where are you going with using ChatGPT in your work?
I'm not exactly sure, because I'm initially in Who Makes the MBA, I'm like, I'm going to just write 100 more books. Like, that was the best month of my life. I read 100 more books. I have 100 of the best months of my life. And I think, it's a little hard. I haven't gotten monetization on Who Makes the MBA right yet. So I've sold a lot for a self-published book for sure. But it's not enough to make it a worthwhile financial pursuit, even in a month of time. It's almost enough if it was just a month of time, but I also did some promotion and podcasts and stuff, that it would be kind of a worthwhile financial pursuit. It's not a big deal. I mean, I don't need to get into details. I have a bunch of savings from my previous stuff, so I'm not like in that much need of money right now. So like, I am tempted to just explore my creativity and see where it goes. But if this book like sold a ton of copies, then I'd just be like, boom, go to the next book. I've kind of been playing around with advertising to see, interestingly, if you publish a book with a traditional publisher, advertising it yourself doesn't really make any sense, because you get about $1 for every book. But if you self-publish it, you might get about $6 for every book. So it might actually make sense to advertise, because the order percent of clicks who order might be enough to make it cost effective.
Got it.
So I've kind of been playing around with advertising, but I haven't gotten to the place where it's cost effective. So I'm kind of like, I'm playing around a lot with that. If I could figure that out, I'd just be like, oh my God, this is the most fun. I'll do this until I die. Who makes the NFL? Who makes the Olympics? Who makes Major League Baseball? Who becomes president?
But I mean, I really think, I think you could do that. Like, I feel like there's some way to monetize this that would work. Is even if you like, comparing this to self-published, even though you make 100% traditionally published, even though you make 100% of the book sales, like, your previous books were more profitable is what you're saying. Even though for those books, you made like $1 of every sale.
Yeah, well, that was due to the advances. And also my first book, Everybody Lies, kind of just exploded. It just hit the zeitgeist kind of perfectly. It was about what we can learn about people from their Google searches. And it just like, it was a bestseller. It's, sold hundreds of thousands or more copies, and just in the United States and all around the world. And I got a big advance for it. So, and then because of the success of that book, I got a really big, even bigger advance for my second book. But then that book kind of didn't sell as many copies, but I still got the advance. So,
right. That makes sense. I mean, everything I know about publishing books, especially self-publishing, is that you can one book builds on the next. And so if you have a bunch of them in a series, like the 10th one, because, people who are fans of that one are going to want to read the previous ones, you kind of like build this like self-sustaining audience where even if the first one isn't well monetized, like the 10th one might be, which might be. Yeah.
There's just always a part of me that's like, Seth, are you just being the most impractical possible? Like, you have a PhD in economics from a top school. You're a data scientist, worked at Google. Like, most people who become like romance novelists with like series of books don't have all those credentials that could potentially be more lucrative. So I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I just shouldn't care about that. And I love writing and I love this so much that even if it's a long shot, or even the most successful version of it, like if you look at the romance novelists that are making a living at self-publishing books, it's not the living of a data scientist salary necessarily.
That's true.
But it's, of course there are exceptions. There are some people who've, hit it out of the park and made $40 million of their self-published books, but there's a lot of selection bias there. So you got to be a little careful. Sometimes I do interrupt myself and I'm just like, why yet again? I went to Stanford as an undergrad and everyone was majoring in CS. I majored in philosophy. There were like Really? At Stanford or?
No, at Penn.
Okay, at Penn, yeah. Yeah. There are philosophy graduation. Maybe this is the same for you. There were like 4 people at the graduation ceremony. And I'm like, why? Like, and then I'm like, okay, this isn't smart. So I pivoted to an economics PhD. And then like I got a job at Google. And I was right on the path of practicality. And I'm like, I got to write books about people's sexuality as learned by internet searches. And then like I did that, and then I was doing well there. I was consulting. I was making a living of it. Like I was making a really good living. And I'm like, AI book about basketball. Got to do it. Like I always have this like this pull towards these things that I'm so passionate about that I'm not sure. Maybe that's just me, and I just have to accept that. That's who I am, and I'm not someone who's going to climb the corporate ladder as a data scientist. But I don't know. It's interesting to.
I mean, I vibe with that. I had a very similar journey. Like I studied philosophy, but I've been programming since I was in 5th grade, and I ran a enterprise software company in college and sold it coming out of college. And like instead of going right back into that and like starting another software business, like I ended up writing a newsletter and starting a podcast and running and it took me a while to like admit to myself that this is what I wanted to do, but like I freaking love it. So maybe I'm maybe speaking to the devil on your shoulder, but like it's very like I'm at a place with everywhere I can sort of pay for all the bills with it, and it's very rewarding to be able to kind of like just be curious all day. So I hope that happens for you. I suspect that there are ways to monetize this that are compelling. Like honestly, if you just did a ChatGPT for data scientist course, like you could make a lot of money with that. If you wanted to do half that and half this.
Interesting. Yeah, I haven't been. I kind of my monetization strategy for my previous books also was just work like hell on them and on the promotion of them, and then just wait till people emailed me for things they wanted me to do for money. Which actually, because my first book was so successful, it was like I was living the dream. I had to pinch myself. There was like I'd open my inbox and there'd be give a talk here for a lot of money, consult on this for a lot of money, blah blah blah. But I kind of got spoiled because my first book was like 100, my second book was 20, my third book's 5. So like the number of emails coming in offering me lucrative engagements is just so much lower. So I think now I need to think more about like I can't just go just think about the content I got to think about other revenue streams and creating courses or creating newsletters or all these things that might help.
That makes perfect sense. Well, I hope you figure it out. I hope if there's anyone watching that wants to hire you for data science, we'll make sure to, or ChatGPT stuff, we'll make sure to put all your contact information in the show notes. And yeah, I really appreciate you coming on this. I love this conversation. I feel very inspired right now.
Awesome. No, thanks for following your dreams. Cause I think, from a fan of yours perspective, we're very happy that you're doing this podcast and doing all these things that are so enlightening to people, thinking through these issues. So that's another reason to follow what you love. I think definitely I probably do more good in the world entertaining people with sports books than I would just another line coder at a company.
That's true. So I hope you find that for yourself, and I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, Dan.
Gosh, folks, you absolutely positively have to smash that like button and subscribe to How Do You Use ChatGPT. Why? Because this show is the epitome of awesomeness. It's like finding a treasure chest in your backyard, but instead of gold, it's filled with pure, unadulterated knowledge bombs about ChatGPT. Every episode is a roller coaster of emotions, insights, and laughter that will leave you on the edge of your seat, craving for more. It's not just a show. It's a journey into the future with Dan Shipper as the captain of the spaceship. So do yourself a favor, hit like, smash subscribe, and strap in for the ride of your life. And now, without any further ado, let me just say, Dan, I'm absolutely, hopelessly in love with you.